Hello and welcome to another review. This one is for the hotly anticipated 900 Global Reality Check. The buzz is so high that I've decided to give one of them away, so stick around to find out how to enter, and if you want to get one pre-ordered, check out my link in the description to get one secured from Bowler's Mart. We're here at Royal Crest Lanes in Lawrence, Kansas with Angel first, and I've made a guaranteed rate PBR Snickers Kia USB-C call to the bullpen on this one for the flame-throwing righty to close on both the house shot and the 2019 Open Championships doubles and singles pattern. The house shot similar to Kegel's Easy Street, just a little higher volume, so medium volume, medium length, and average difficulty for a house shot. Also, because of the inevitable comparison that everyone wants to know about, I went ahead and polished Angels while we left James' ball at the 4K fast box finish so that we can get a couple different surface looks as well. The Reality Check features the same strong asymmetric disturbance core from the Reality and Altered at a 249 RG 052 differential and an 018 intermediate differential, and while it's a hybrid, it's not the hybrid version of the cover from those two. The strength is still 84. If you didn't know what the numbers meant before, basically they're just ranking the strength of the cover on a scale from 1 to 100, but the version of this one is beta rather than response. It's supposed to be of similar strength but cleaner and more responsive versus the S84 response cover on the Reality and Altered, but we're really not seeing that. I'm pretty much going to echo what Luis Napoles had to say on this one. Both Angel and James are seeing the same things he did. It just doesn't hook early. The length, I think, is the most noticeable feature, but it's also smoother than the Altered at least. We'll see comparisons to both the Altered and the original Reality later in the video. The check has a controlled and continuous arc, and while it's not flippy, it's not exactly smooth either, but the length especially makes it a stark contrast to the Reality and the Altered. The check is a quite different look for the Reality line across the board, just like the Infinite Physics offers a different look for the Physics line, and this will disappoint some people, but it's not an Altered replacement, not remotely. Now, a big point to make, and given the differences, it's odd that this is a thing, but the check does give you the same feeling of being able to stand left and just send it without having to worry about it missing the spot. We'll see that being demonstrated later by James. With it being so long and average on friction response, it sure doesn't seem to forget to hook where it's supposed to. Looking at the Altered, it doesn't take long to see the difference. Now, while the friction response or back end is still sharp, even shiny, the Altered wants to start up much earlier. Both it and the Reality are very energetic. They hit the lane, they start revving up fast, and almost seem to accelerate on their way down the lane. The check gets much more length. It covers a lot of ground when it starts moving, but it doesn't get traction or look like it's trying to start up near as early. It's a lot more refined and patient. However, for those looking for an Altered replacement and hoping the check would be it does do the two key things the Altered was popular for. It does turn the corner, and it's almost impossible to throw through the spot, so let's crank up Wild Thing, bring out Ricky Vaughn, and give him the heater. The easiest comparison is that the check is a much stronger RSTX2, but the length and shape does a good job disguising the amount of traction it gets and how much it actually hooks. The X2 has a much cleaner cover, and because of that, it can sometimes get late and wiggly or miss the spot. The check doesn't blow through the back end though. I'm not one for hype or clickbait, but it's kind of a wild look. If you made the X2 a little earlier and slightly smoother and like an arrow stronger, plus made it uber consistent on the back end, that's the check. I'm a big fan of the X2, don't get me wrong, it just needs a decent amount of friction to be at its best, and the check is up there with the most consistent balls on the back end that I've seen. That's the point of the asymmetry though, it add torque to really get it to pick up down lane. Now usually with balls this clean up front, the trade-off is sometimes being too clean like the X2. Now of course on the flip side, with balls that are as strong and fast as the Altered, you can end up getting just too much overall aggression, which is what Angel's problem with it was. It was definitely quick enough down lane, it was just ultimately too overwhelming when combined with strength and how fast it wanted to get moving. Now watching James here, the check is one that you can saw on and send it right, and if you do get it to miss the spot, you're doing something incredibly wrong. Even with Luis's being smoother, he was still getting it to pull up from anywhere he threw it to, and it's the same overall experience for Angel and James. No issues getting it through the fronts and boomtown down lane. The ball motion's also quite a bit more forgiving, I think, than the Altered. If you got slow or tugged the Altered, it was moving. There was no prayer it was holding, but James has a trough here. It jumps back from the outside and gives him some blend on the inside. Now, I know people like to see misses in videos. There's definitely a couple here in a minute on the sports shot, but there weren't many here to show you. The check was the easy button for him on the house shot. He's got all kinds of room, and it allows him to comfortably execute because he didn't have to launch it to get it down the lane or rev it up to get it to finish. Switching to the original reality, which is at the box surface of 2000, you can see the familiarity, but obviously the reality is a lot earlier. Now the surface does account for a lot of that, but he's had his reality lane shined in at 4K before, and he said the check is still a couple feet longer, but a similar friction response if at the same surface. With both balls at box, they make great complements. This is where the overall traction amount of the check really shows up. The reality is definitely earlier and smoother, but the total hook or traction is a lot more similar than it seems like it should be. I noted earlier that the length and shape might fake you out or disguise the amount the check actually hooks, so here's your illustration and comparison. The reality is earlier and smoother with the surface for sure, but there's very little of any actual strength or traction difference. So if you do start with the reality and go to ball down, you're not giving a lot away. You're getting a similar look, you're just adjusting the shape when the reality gets too early or slow. Moving to the 2019 Open Championships doubles and singles pattern, 42 feet, 28.4 mils, just above a 2-to-1 ratio, so it's heavy, it's flat, and it's hard. We'll start with the reality first to kind of illustrate what I just finished talking about, also because when he was warming up on the other lane, the check was going bonkers. It's definitely not the right ball in the fresh, just a little too sensitive. The reality is more of what he wants to start with on this kind of pattern. There's very little room for errors, so strong ball with surface to get traction, blend, and control in the fresh. It's a good look. You've seen that we're definitely on a tougher pattern already, but it's easy to see why the reality has been as popular as it has. It's not as slow or smooth as most heavier oil balls are, but it still gets the dig or the traction that they do, so it's a compromise between a hook monster and something like the check, which is just too responsive for this pattern on the fresh. This is also a pattern you don't want to move left on any faster than you have to. James' game requires a certain amount of angle, but too much too soon can wreck the pattern. He's also trying to create some stability in transition for the check, get some burnout there by the gutters, so the wet-dry line isn't so severe. Looking at the check now, it reinforces the comparison to the reality. The check is a fair amount longer and even more dynamic, but plays virtually on top of the reality. This probably still isn't the right ball choice at this point, and maybe not on this pattern at all, because the extra volume up front makes it sharper, but it's still a good illustration of what this ball does and what its use cases are going to be. I'll have a Sport Essentials video at some point soon that will be more in-depth on its sport uses and applications, but I'd expect it to be somewhat limited to longer and heavier patterns. It's going to be way too responsive for shorter and flatter stuff, especially on the fresh, in addition to its overall strength, but it's sharp enough that where it's really going to come into play is if you need both traction and shape. Like I mentioned with the reality, it's been so good because heavy oil balls are typically pretty early and smooth, and that can create angle issues, especially when getting into transition. Too early / too much from straight, but too slow or lazy when you move in. The reality still gives you the traction in addition to shape that helps with the angle, and the check doubles down on that by backing up the reality as you continue to adjust to transition. As the lanes continue to transition and he gets deeper, the look improves. It's not quite as sensitive, a little more blend, so it's going to be better on transition on tougher patterns than on the fresh. A surface adjustment might help out there, but like I said, these two are great complements. I'd keep the reality at box and back it up with this one at box. I don't think that there's much of a reason to mess with it. The Reality Check and Wolverine Dark Moss release on July 29th, and oh yeah, I said I was giving a reality check away. 900 Global's YouTube channel is currently a little shy of 7,000 subs, and I wanted to get that up, so if we can get them to 10,000 subs by release date for the Check and Wolverine, I'll give a reality check away in whatever weight that you need from the available weights they make, of course. Lower 48 states only, sorry, but I'm not paying $500 to ship a ball to Australia. The link to their channel is in the description, so head that way after the video and subscribe. You need to be subscribed to me too, of course, and the way to complete the entry is to leave a comment on this video with a tip like I usually drop into the videos, like, it's not wise to upset a Wookiee, droids don't tear people's arms out of their sockets when they lose. The tip that I like the best wins the ball and will get featured in a future video. Has to be PG, of course. The deadline for commenting is noon Central on July 29th, 2022. Now, depending on how far past 10K we get them, might even be some extra prizes, who knows. Big shout out and major thanks to all my Patreon subs and my great Discord community that I don't talk about or thank nearly enough. If you like the jerseys, use my code Rosdahl10 to save 10% off your CoolWick order at checkout. Use my link to Bowler's Mart to buy your stuff, really helps me out. SRGBBFS group on Facebook. Thanks Turbo, big thanks to Storm. Thank you for watching, and may the strikes be with you.